Welcome back everybody to another episode of our weekly Moto News Roundup, where this time we'll look at yet more trouble for KTM. Triumph announced a new custom bike competition, BMW are set to announce 2 new huge model updates, Kawasaki complete a lap of Le Mans with their new eco-friendly bike, Ultraviolet find a distributor in the UK and Europe, Indian unveil their new super expensive elite models, Harley's boardroom looks like absolute carnage, and we'll round off with a look at Livewire's new electric police motorcycles. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Quadlock for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. Basically, if you want a phone mount for your motorcycle, then Quadlock, in my opinion, make the best in the business, with a huge range of mounts to fit all bikes of all shapes and sizes. Plus, they've got a brilliant range of accessories like their wireless charging head, like the vibration dampener, and also a great ecosystem of other products so you can use your Quadlock mounts for the car, running, cycling, stuff like that. And so look, I've got a full guide to the entire product range for 2025 that I made a couple of months back, so I'll put that in the description, a link to that, but also a link to their website where you can find all their products and pick up your own. So once again, a massive thanks to them for their support, and with that, let's take a look at the latest on KTM. It's not great news, in that again they've had to pause production for the second time I believe this year. And look, if you're not up to speed on the whole saga, then here's a very brief summary. Basically, they had to put themselves into self-administration around the start of this year, with a really difficult couple of years, leading them into some severe financial difficulties. This self-administration process involved a whole bunch of court proceedings, which culminated in a vote with their creditors who approved a plan for them to pay back, well, just a small part of what they owed, but it basically totaled, I think, 548 million euros, and it's got to be paid by the 23rd of May this year. While that whole process was going on, they paused production at the factory. It was basically shut down, and it probably didn't help that because they were struggling to sell bikes for a year or two, they built up this massive backlog of unsold bikes in dealers that was believed to be around 250,000 bikes. Anyway, they did find a bit of money, I think from Bajaj, to get things going again, but now production is paused again. I think it was first reported on 1000 PS, who say that their CEO, the KTM CEO, Gottfried Neumaster, issued a statement to staff that production could no longer continue as there was actually a shortage of critical parts. So basically they run out of the stuff to make the bikes. Perhaps not that surprising, is it? I mean, the fact that they're due to pay back just a third of what they owed to a lot of their suppliers probably means that there aren't that many people still keen to make and sell them the parts they need for the bikes. In fact, there's also a rumor this week as well that they may not even be able to find that money, the 548 million euros, by the 23rd of May. And Pira Mobility, the group that owns KTM, have postponed the release of their 2024 financial report while they try to figure it all out. This week, we also got the news that KTM will no longer be responsible for distributing CF Moto's bikes in Europe, which probably is another blow, to be honest. I mean, they say it was a mutual decision to split ways. They will still partner on manufacturing bikes in China. CF Moto make the 790 KTMs, for example. But in terms of the CF Moto bikes being sold in the UK and Europe, well, they'll have to find a new importer. And I kind of feel like that's mostly beneficial to CF Moto. They seem to be on the up. Most people can't afford an expensive bike at the moment, and they've got a great range of new bikes coming out. Really tempting price points. The 450 MT adventure bike's been a great example of that, a good seller because it's great value. Whereas KTM are in this constant state of turmoil. And so yeah, I feel like CF Moto might be better off distancing themselves from that unpredictability and instability. It's really not looking great at the moment for KTM, is it? I mean, it wasn't looking great before, but there was a bit of hope when their plans for restructuring were approved. But can they realistically find the best part of 600 million euros in the next month? And if they can't, what's that going to mean for them? As always, I'd love to know what you think down in the comments. On to something a little bit lighter over at Triumph though. They've just announced a new build-off competition called Triumph Originals. Now they say 8 Triumph teams from the UK, USA, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, France, Italy and Thailand will collaborate with a locally selected custom builder to develop a unique interpretation of British cultural influence using a Bonneville model of their choice as the foundation. A shortlist of 5 builds will be selected by an expert panel of judges, recruited celebrated for their knowledge of motorcycle design, custom craftsmanship, and broader cultural industries, and who will be revealed in May 2025. The shortlist will be put to a public vote, which, along with scoring of each build by the judging panel, will determine the Triumph Original 2025 winner. This winner will be announced at the end of July 2025. I covered something similar to this a few years back. I was at the Triumph factory and I got to see all these different custom builds based upon Bonnies. And so yeah, definitely up my street this. As you know, I'm a T120 owner, a massive Bonneville fan, love a custom Bonnie as well. So hopefully we'll get to shoot something again with the finished bikes. But in the meantime, I'll link to the dedicated website for this build-off down in the description so you can keep up to date. And as soon as we hear more, we'll follow up with the builds when we can. I should also point out that one of the highlights, if not the highlight, of the custom bike calendar in the UK is just about on the horizon now, with the Bike Shed show taking place in London on the 23rd, 24th and 25th of May. So just under a month away now. I'll certainly be heading down this year to check it out, but if you also fancy making it to the show, then they've been kind enough to give us a 10% discount code specifically for our viewers, and so use MOTOBOB10 to get 10% off your tickets. One of the headline attractions at this year's Bike Shed show as well will be a live podcast with Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor, in which they talk about their latest series, Long Way Home. The reason it's relevant? Well, I guess partly because I believe Charlie Borman's an investor in the Bike Shed, but also they shot this series not on the GS's and the Livewires that they did last time, but some actually old or classic bikes, and Charlie specifically has been customized slightly by Kevil's Speed Shop, so they're riding kind of the kinds of bikes that you probably see at the Bike Shed show. Now, the trailer's already out for this show, but it comes out in full on the 9th of May, so do keep your eyes peeled for that if you enjoyed the past few series. And actually, to mark the occasion, just this week gone, I was lucky enough to go to Charlie's place to have a look at the bike in the flesh, speak to him about the series, and even let me take it for a little spin up and down the road, which was a real highlight of the day. Apple have asked me to hold off on publishing that one, but again, if you want to get a bit hyped before the new series and get a little bit more insight on the bike, I believe I'm allowed to publish it from the 5th of May. So a week on Monday, and so absolutely another one to keep an eye out for if you're a fan of the show, or Charlie, or to a lesser extent me. In fact, in that interview, we talked a little bit about the R1300 GS. He's ridden it for a series with Touratech in Thailand, and so I was really interested to find out what he thought about it and whether adventure bikes have become too qualified and too techy, so much so that they kind of sterilize the sense of adventure, which you wouldn't get with the kind of old, retro or classic boxer like the one he rode, the R75-5. This is also topical in another way though, because BMW have been teasing their 1300 update for both the RT and the RS. So both Tourers, the RT a little bit more traditional, the RS, well, a sports tourer, and it looks like along with getting the chassis upgrades and also that new 1300 engine, they'll be absolutely dripping with the latest tech. Expect radars for active cruise control and blind spot warnings, for example. Perhaps we'll see, at least on the RT as well, the adaptive ride height features that you get on the GS. And of course, ASA or Automated Shift Assistant, that's going to be an option as well, so the ability to ride the bike without the clutch and also set it in an automatic mode so it takes care of the gears on your behalf. I'm certainly interested to see what they come up with, so these ones are going to be announced on Tuesday this week. I'll put a full rundown of them up on Wednesday. But yeah, I fully expect these to be kind of polarizing. On the one hand, if you love your tech, these are probably going to be great. If you don't, then they're probably not going to be your cup of tea. Speaking of new developments and new tech though, well, over at Kawasaki, their attention is on emissions with their hydrogen-powered H2 completing a lap of the Le Mans circuit this week. They rolled it out for a demo lap before the 24-hour endurance race with an H2-derived supercharged 998cc inline 4, but this time not using petrol, it's purely fueled by hydrogen. This is part of a project as well that they say will lead to a production hydrogen bike by the early 2030s, which sounds kind of crazy. And the prototype was first shown last year, I think, 2024. But I think I'm right in saying this might be one of the first public demos of it. And on paper, it does sound pretty great. It's cleaner than petrol, of course, but as opposed to an electric, you still get the character and nuance of an internal combustion engine with all of the soul that it gives you and noise that it gives you. And the only downside, well, it is a substantial downside perhaps, is that the Hydrogen does need a lot of storage. So unfortunately, those massive panniers that you can see in the footage here, well, it doesn't mean you can take loads of gear with you on a tour. They're actually full of hydrogen canisters. The fact that they're intending to make a production version is kind of crazy. I mean, how they'll get around this glaring shortcoming of trying to fit loads of hydrogen on what is a small vehicle remains to be seen, and it'd be impressive if they do come up with a solution to that. But I'd love to know what you think of it in the comments. Is this a good idea and a good avenue for them to explore? Or is it just going to be another low emissions initiative like their hybrid bikes that ends in potentially failure? I mean, they've just massively discounted those bikes because they haven't really been able to sell any, for example. Perhaps better off to just go electric. Certainly one of the bikes that had a lot of people talking at EICMA last year was the Ultraviolet F77 Mach 2. In fact, I got quite a lot of comments on the channel asking why I didn't get round to covering this one, and truth be told, we just ran out of time. But I can see why people were interested because it's very striking to look at. Perhaps the bark is a little bit louder than the bite because the performance figures are, well, fairly average. It's 40 horsepower peak. I think they say about 140 miles of mixed riding range. But certainly it stands out from the crowd from a visual perspective, and that could help them sell some, along with the price being fairly decent with an introductory offer of just 8.5 grand. These ones are built in India, but previously they weren't going to be available in the UK and Europe. But the news is this week they've just signed a deal with MOTOBOB that covers the UK, Belgium, the Netherlands and Luxembourg. So yeah, expect to see these in the next couple of months in dealers. And it's another one I'd love to know your thoughts on. Is it a cool looking bike or too much and almost toy-like? Let me know what you think. At the other end though of the pricing spectrum, well, we've got the new 2025 Elite models announced this week from Indian. Both the Challenger and the Pursuit get the Elite treatment for this year. So they're big heavyweight tourers, one with full luggage and one with just the kind of side cases, or you might call that a bagger. And basically Elite is like their top of the range flagship models, a bit like the CVOs at Harley. Both of these are powered by their 126 horsepower liquid cooled Power Plus engine on a relatively sporty chassis, it has to be said, for this category of American bike, with stuff like radial Brembo brakes and an upside down fork. Tech is full on too. You've got blind spot warnings, you've got rear collision warnings, you've got lean sensitive traction control and ABS, linked braking, hill hog control, an adaptive headlight, keyless ignition, remote locking luggage, cruise control of course, an electric windscreen, and rear cylinder deactivation, so the back cylinder shuts off at a standstill to try and stop you from cooking your balls, basically. Specifically though for these Elite models, well, they get a fully decked out audio system. So on the bike with the 2 cases, you get 4 speakers, I think 2 in the cases at the back and 2 in the fairing at the front. And on the one that gets the full luggage, you get a set of 6 speakers, 2 in the fairing, 2 in the bags, and also 2 in the top case. But other than that, the thing that really does make them stand out from their standard Challenger and Pursuit counterparts is realistically these paint jobs. Indians say the Challenger Elite pulls its design inspiration from the legacy of Gene Alabama Flash Walker, who set a land speed record in 1920 on his Indian Power Plus and was considered the fastest man alive. Wearing a tritone paint job with premium black candy and red candy finishes over crystal white pearl satin paint, the Indian Challenger Elite is highlighted with glass particles in the paint to add brilliance and depth. The Pursuit, on the other hand, well, it draws its inspiration from the production of 20,000 Power Plus motorcycles in 1916 for the US Army. The limited edition touring motorcycle features a tritone paint with premium black candy and black forest candy finishes, highlighted with the artistry of hand-painted championship gold accents. Gotta say, both paint jobs do look quite special, and just 350 of the Challenger will be made worldwide, and 250 of the Pursuit. The price though, £36,695 for the bagger, £37,695 for the full touring spec, or that's $39,999 in the US and $44,999. I'm not sure why there's a £1,000 difference in the UK and a $5,000 difference between the two in the US. But either way, it's still a lot of money. In fact, if you remember recently, we talked about the fact that after some really poor financial results, Indian took the decision to completely discontinue the entire FTR lineup, which is their smaller, more sporty naked bike. They said they wanted to focus on the core stuff that makes them plenty of money, I guess, and should put them back in a healthier state. And so I guess this is probably what they meant. Heavyweight tourers with fancy paint that most people simply can't afford. Also, with the poor results lately was Harley. We talked about that a couple of episodes back. And their CEO, Jochen Zeitz, also recently announced that he'll retire later this year. Now, this has triggered like this massive saga in the Harley boardroom with their second biggest shareholder, I believe, a group called H Partners, basically wanting a certain person to replace him as CEO. That got kind of knocked back. And so they've launched this campaign to basically try and get Jochen Zeitz out immediately, along with a couple of the directors who are fairly long-standing. They're pretty much fed up, I think, of the company underperforming. They want all the other shareholders to vote to not re-elect these three at this year's annual meeting of the shareholders, which I think is coming up in May. They've even built this website called freetheeagle.com in which they're trying to convince everyone to vote these guys out. And it goes into some detail about their grievances. They list major execution issues, shareholder value destruction, the failure of the hardwire strategy that they've been working on for the past few years, which was, I think, Jochen Zeitz's initiative, the inability to course correct, and a whole bunch of other stuff. What they want to come out of this is to be able to appoint a new external CEO rather than recruiting from internally, to try and find someone who can, take the business in a new direction and a successful direction, giving shareholders some value back. It will certainly be interesting to see how this one plays out. We'll follow up when we get updates, but normally you describe it as a complete shit show. It's just that we're measuring stuff by KTM standards at the moment, so relatively it doesn't sound that bad. But we'll round off today with a look at the new police bikes from what was Harley's electric brand, Livewire, although they're now separate entities. But they've announced this week, they're going to make some police bikes available built upon their S2 platform. So it'll either be the S2 Del Mar or the S2 Alpinista. One's a bit more flat track inspired, the Del Mar. The Alpinista's more of like a naked bike, a little bit more sporty. And both can be spec'd up with crash bars, handguards, windscreens, loads of lights, the controls for the lights, luggage, and I think 120 decibel siren. Livewire is saying these are a great choice for law enforcement purposes because they're torquey, easy to ride at low speeds, there's no clutch to operate a course, relatively easy to maintain, quiet as well, they say, so ideal if you're trying to sneak up on some bad guys. And also, perhaps weirdly, they cite that one of the benefits is they're approved for indoor use. Anyway, apparently they've already sold some to the police in a city in Florida, so perhaps we'll be seeing more of these out on the roads at some point. Although, of course, I have to say, the range on an S2 Del Mar is about 113 miles in the city. That's with mixed riding with some regenerative braking. But on the motorway, I think it's more like 70 miles. Oh no, 43. If it sustains 70 miles an hour on the motorway, then it'll do just 43 miles on a charge. So I'd never advocate trying to outrun a police motorcycle at all. Well, if you've got a full tank and a motorway nearby, sounds like you got a chance. As always though, I'd love to hear from you in the comments, so do leave one down below as to what you think of this week's stories. I'll also leave last week's episode on the screen now where we looked at some spy shots of a new 750 Royal Enfield Himalayan. So do give that one a watch in case you missed it. Hit subscribe if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching this week, and we'll see you next time.